to episode 3 of Absolute Football Thunders. I mean, I'm saying absolute because you are a right pair of thunders as far as I'm concerned. Good evening to Ryan Scott.
Good evening.
Oh, hello to Ryan Scott. And hello to Dan Finch.
Hello, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening and whenever.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
And me, Peter Finch. So this has been recorded just before the EFL season kicks off. The 72 kick off their games at the weekend. And it all starts here. And also, with just news, hot off the press that we've just heard, Lionel Messi has left Barcelona very quickly. Let's deal with that. 30 seconds. Go, each one of you. Go, Ryan, you want to talk about this first, didn't you?
Not surprised. They didn't have the money. They're £1 billion in debt. It was never really going to happen, no matter how much of a wage cut he took.
Dan?
My thing is, as you said, not really a surprise. I'm just more intrigued in where he goes next. Would have said Man City, but who knows?
But that they've made signings, or have they?
They've technically paid the clubs for them, but haven't officially signed them so that they can be played in La Liga. So, yeah, awkward.
All good. That's the Messi situation. Where do you think it? Paris Saint-Germain, do you reckon?
It has to be. The only two teams I think could even go near affording him is PSG and Man City.
And Man City are just signing Grealish and maybe possibly another. Can they afford to have Messi as well? Or do they want Messi? Ryan?
I don't think they want Messi. I don't think they can afford Messi. I think you'll find Messi will go to America because they'll get enough sponsorship money to pay his wages, and he'll be one of the big players in a very small pond. He is 34, don't forget. He is coming to the end of his career.
Okay, fair enough. Right, let's start dealing with tonight. We're going to look at these the League Two, League One, and the Championship and the Premier League. Or do we leave the Premier League until a week's time, because that starts in a week's time? Do we give a whole episode to that? It's up to you, boys. You tell me now, quickly, before we go any further.
I'm happy to leave the Premier League if you want. I'm just not going to be able to contribute.
Can leave it for a week.
Okay, so we're just doing the EFL this week, and then we'll be here next week, and we'll do the Premier League. So League Two. I know little about League Two. What I do know is there are a couple of teams that I think are going to struggle. One of them being Rochdale, have only got about 10 out first team players. Another one who initially may struggle are Swindon, because they've had all manner of disasters in terms of ownership over the last few years. But in the last couple of weeks, they've got new owners. So it depends how quick they can turn around and go out and sign players. Dan? So let's deal with who's going down first. Who's going to be leaving?
So Rochdale, I think, as you said, we all know that they're in the problems they're in, and Stevenage are one of those teams that for years everyone says should be down there, will be down there, and kind of managed to stay up normally by the skin of their teeth. I looked through their squads, and their squad doesn't fill me with confidence. Scunthorpe as well are contenders. Hartlepool, Barrow, but for me, Southend have no players. Not Southend. Stevenage have no players that jump out at me. It's good enough to keep them in the league.
So, are we saying Rochdale and Stevenage? Is that the two that are going down?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of teams that could, but they're definitely contenders.
So let's look at the who's likely out of those teams. That's the bottom part of the league dealt with. The top half of the league, who are the teams that you're looking at, you're thinking, right, they're a good chance? When you bear in mind last season, I think Exeter were up there, Newport County with a good manager, they are going to be in with a shout, but are they going to be automatic promotion, or are they going to have to go through the playoffs again, which they've not really enjoyed the playoffs at all, have they?
No, they haven't, but I think, as you said, Michael Flynn has done wonders for them, the way that when he took over the state that Newport were in when Terry Butcher left, the fact that they stayed up that season was amazing, and then went on, as you said, sadly, to playoff defeats last year in the hands of Morecambe. But I do think they'll go up this year. I think they're one of the three that will go up automatically. I think Patrick Amon scores goals for fun. They've got a really solid back line. Their keeper that they had a few years, Joe Day, is back. He spent time with Cardiff. I think that there's a good nucleus there that have been there for a few years. I wouldn't be shocked to see them promoted.
And Bradford, another one that's tipped possibly for promotion in that league.
Yeah, I personally haven't gone for Bradford. I could see why. Andy Cook is a fabulous striker, and they've got some nice pieces. Manager that took Morecambe up last year in Adams. But I don't think about Bradford, I don't know if it's because they have been hyped for the last 2 years and then they've underwhelmed, but I haven't gone for them.
Exeter.
No.
How about that? Got to the playoffs last year. You really don't think they're going to do it this
I
year?
I think Exeter have just lost their best player in Joel Randall to Peterborough.
Yeah.
For nice money, it's rumoured to be around about £1 million. That must be fantastic for Exeter City, but I think that's going to be a big loss for them. They lost Randall Williams too to Hull, so I think they might fall off the playoff hunt. It wouldn't shock me. I hope Matty Taylor does great. A former Charlton player. I hope success for him, but maybe not this year.
And Mansfield Town with former Charlton player George Latchley bossing the midfield. What do we think about their chances?
I think Mansfield are a good side. They've got some good players. George Latchley is the man.
They finished 16th last season. I've got to think about them.
They
finished well though.
They finished strongly. They're a club that always invests with their playing squad. I think they got taken over a few years back. But George Latchley, as you said, is going to be a key member of their squad. Jordan Bowery is a goal scorer. Ollie Clark, a former Bristol Rovers player, is going to be a contender. While we're talking about Bristol Rovers, I think they need a big mention. They're one of the clubs I think have a fantastic chance. Brandon Hanlon up front. They've signed Brett Pittman. That's a lot of experience. Hasn't maybe scored the goals in recent years that he has in the past, but
they've got a managerial situation that is less than perfect, with Joey Barton seemingly in and out of allegedly courthouses here and there for various misdemeanors. Is he going to be the manager come the start of the season, or is he going to be the manager for the long term?
I'd say no, but I think there's enough talent in that squad. Their front three and their strike force, Aaron Collins, who was fantastic for Forest Green. We'll get on to Forest Green in a minute, I'm sure. Aaron Collins, as I said, fantastic. Brandon Hanlon, we saw at Charlton. I was amazed when we got rid of him. Spent time at Gillingham, is now at Bristol Rovers. Brett Pittman, of course. Jack Baldwin at the back has had experience with Sunderland in League One. So I think they've got a good nucleus of squad. That hopefully there's a manager. Our family, obviously, are Bristol Rovers fans. So hopefully the manager comes in, sorts them out. I do think the players are there.
Salford. We've got to talk about Salford. They seem to spend, because they're backed by the class of '92, it seems, and the money from the class of '92. They've rebuilt the stadium, looks lovely, but they do like to sack a manager. Managers don't stay long at Salford, do they?
Well, yeah, that seems to be the issue. Managers are changed 2 or 3 times a year because maybe they're on the edge of the playoffs. And League Two is one of those leagues where if you do hit a bit of bad form, you can go from 5th to 19th in a couple of weeks. But again, they also have some really good players. Ian Henderson up front, Tom Elliott, Ashley Hunter. They should have a squad that's up there, but I don't trust that the kick manager is going to be there by December.
Yes, Brian.
I was just going to say, actually, I was listening to an interview with Gary Neville the other day on Sky, and he said that he took responsibility for the recent issues at Salford with the managers coming in and out in such quick succession, and that he didn't feel he'd done things properly, that they had the squad, but the managerial situation was always what was crippling them. And so he claims that they've looked at themselves in depth and they believe that they've made the right decisions for this season.
Some people do talk a good game, though, don't they? And the other thing, when you look at that Salford team and the owners, these are players who played pretty much for one manager, where it was a consistent manager. Do you not think they would think to build a club around one manager and give them a bit of time?
I
assume that's go on.
All I was going to say is Gary Neville in the interview said that becoming an owner as opposed to being a fan or a coach had led him down a path to do things that he didn't think he would have done. But they're not averse to doing this before. I remember when they first took over the club, they had a duo management team at the time. Yeah, and then they quickly got shot of them because they wanted to go in a different direction. Yeah. So Gary Neville did say that the ownership had kind of lost its way with the view of what they were trying to do. Situations had forced their hands into taking a different tack to what they actually wanted to take. So I think they've readdressed. Gary Neville claims they've readdressed that this year.
Right, Dan, go on.
The team that I think we haven't mentioned, we've mentioned 6 or 7 teams.
Have we mentioned Carlisle?
we've not mentioned Carlisle. They're not the team I'm going to talk about though, but
Go on.
we've mentioned 6 or 7 teams that I think will be in the playoff picture. The one that I've already kind of spoke about, but not in detail, is Forest Green Rovers.
Right.
They're a club that last year they were in and around the playoffs in the mid-table. They changed manager. They brought in Rob Edwards, who I think was a coach at the club, but not a manager. They were part of a really good playoff game with Newport. If you haven't seen the highlights, go and find it. It was bonkers. They've got some really good players. Nicky Cadden, who came from Scotland, is very good, way too good for that level. Luke McGee in goal is a very good keeper. Jamil Matt, fantastic striker. Jordan Moore Taylor, who was at Exeter, was linked with, I saw him linked with championship clubs. He's gone to Forest Green. If they aren't up there, I would be surprised. They've been up there again for most of the last 3 or 4 years, like Newport, like Exeter. I think it's probably their time now.
Excellent. Ryan, you got anything to add to on League Two, or are we moving on?
I'm afraid not. I will confess to our listeners right now that my love for football grew in Serie A during the early to mid 90s and the Premier League. So when it comes to the lower leagues, I've researched as much as I can, but my opinion beyond the Championship is going to be pretty limited.
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. Right, so we'll move on to. So we're looking at. So we've got a couple of candidates for relegation. We've got someone we think could win the League One title, and we're looking at the playoff contenders, and we're quite happy with that. League One. This is where Dan and I have to declare an interest. We are Charlton fans, and I have to say straight here, as things stand, mid-table at the moment, because that's all we've got at the moment. We've got we do have a half decent first team, but that's it. But it takes, as we've learned over the years under Roland Duchâtelet, it's great to have a brilliant team, a good team. You need a squad. Charlton at the moment, and there's still time, don't have a squad. So let's not dwell on Charlton yet, because I don't think they're in the mix as things stand. Dan?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think if you look at our starting 11, it's a playoff to a top 2 fighting kind of starting 11, but the bench is, I think, apart from Ben Watson, who's about 104, the bench's average age is barely just out of their GCSEs. So I can't imagine Charlton being anywhere near the top.
And the Ben Watson thing, he got offered a new deal this year, and Darren Pratley was released, and I think the club got that one wrong, I have to say. Ryan, what do you want to say about Charlton before we move on any further?
I was going to say, I've actually got you guys for a sneaky playoff place, because over the years, talking with Dan, he always messages me and it's like, we started strong, we're doing well, we'll make the playoffs, this is our year. And then about halfway through the season, he's like, no, it's all falling apart. I think the key thing for Charlton that's different this year is you've got a more experienced manager than you've had previously. Lee Bowyer obviously did a very good job under difficult circumstances with the previous owner and whatnot, and the squad coming and going. But I'm just thinking maybe with a little bit more experienced manager, a pre-season behind him, you might sneak a playoff. You always seem to finish just under.
Yeah, Dan,
I'm very upset about comments against Lee Bowyer.
Yeah.
this man is in charge of one of the most happiest moments of my life.
Yeah,
when we won the League One playoff final at Wembley against Sunderland, and he had no right. We had no right to be there,
absolutely.
And he had no right to lead that club and those players there. I don't know how we did it.
And it's a part. 98 was it. That was coming all season. That one in the one against the second time against Sunderland was so much better because it was so much more against the odds. I mean, the other one was against the odds because where we come from in terms of coming back to the valley, but that one under the end of the Belgian nutcases regime was so unlikely, and I was so excited by it. I got blind drunk the night before the game, didn't I, Dan?
Yes, you did.
vodka. Yeah, Ryan. Yes.
All I'm going to say to Dan is I'm not besmirching Lee Bowyer in any way. I'm just calling it as it was. He was a rookie coach who came into a difficult situation. He did very well, but obviously he's gone now. And with an experienced manager at the level that Charlton are currently at in Nigel Adkins, you never know. You might get lucky. It's a funny old league.
There's a transfer window that's still open, and while there's a transfer window open, then deals can be done. But I'm not sure what deals. But let's wait and see. So we can't say now But the squad, as it stands at the moment, for me, is not playoff material. So let's look at the relegation places. I'll throw one name at you, Dan. Fleetwood Town.
Oh, yeah. Fleetwood.
Yeah.
I consider Fleetwood. They haven't made my four. I've also got one that I think people will pull a face at, but Fleetwood, that has shocked me. Why?
Finished 15th last year, and I just don't think, and their finances are very bad. I mean, they've been really hit badly by the financing, so I think they could struggle.
So
There are other ones like Plymouth and Cambridge that could, but I think Fleetwood are going to have a tough time, and I've got a hope to see down there as well. There'll be no surprise in this with Dan, and it's a Kentish club, and I think that's a spelling mistake. And I suspect I'd love to see Steve Evans get relegated. It's nothing to do with Gillingham. I just cannot stand Steve Evans because I've been in close proximity to that lump of lard, and I've got to tell you, he's possibly the most pathetic character in football I've ever come across. Just leave that one there. Carry on, Dan.
I think he's got a reputation. I remember going to Peterborough away when he was manager of Peterborough and hearing some of the language he was using to the officials. Like, yeah. I know it's football, but he was worse than the fans. The words he was using, I thought, if a microphone picks him up, he's in trouble here.
He sets up his backroom staff, and it's not just him. It's a coordinated attack on the fourth official and the nearest official to the nearest linesman. To the referee's nearest assistant that's near to them on the touchline. It is a coordinated. The only other time I've really seen it that well coordinated will surprise you. Mark Bowen and Mark Hughes at Blackburn. Dan, you were there, remember? In the quarterfinal of the Carling Cup. And those two did not stop on the fourth official. And we didn't stop giving them chip, really. Anyway.
A surprise team. Well, we're talking about surprise teams. For me, there's two teams that I'd say are obvious. Cambridge isn't one of them, but I have got Cambridge down to one for me is Crewe.
Crewe, that's a fair point.
They rely very heavily on their youth system, and they have some very good players. The two very good players right now are Tom Lowry and Charlie Kirk,
and they're being picked off.
Both heavily linked with moves. Tom Lowry has asked to leave to the point where he's been training with the kids because he has said, "I don't want to be here anymore." And Charlie Kirk has been linked with Charlton for a good period of time, and with other clubs. They will both, I'm assuming, be on the move. Their lead striker is Chris Porter. I think he's mid-30s. Doesn't look good for them. The good thing is Jaskalainen in goal, very good keeper, but I'm not sure if he's got it in them. And one of the other clubs, I think Morecambe.
Yep.
Bless them. They had the smallest budget in League Two and got promoted. They lost their manager over the summer. They've pretty much had to build a new squad. It's going to be difficult.
Wimbledon could find it tough as well, couldn't they? They've lost,
but
Wimbledon could find it tough this year. They've come up and they've lost. Oh, they've been up, but they've lost one of their strikers in Joe Piggott's gone to Ipswich, and more about Ipswich in a while. But they've lost a striker who will get goals. He knows where the goal is, and that's going to be a big thing, isn't it, in the league? That's the difference between success in this league. If you haven't got someone who's going to bang the goals in, you're going to struggle, aren't you? And
Rich Cawley, who's a South London Press journalist, who I'll give a shout out to, he obviously covers clues in the name to South London, and he has said the back end of last year, the reason Wimbledon got out of the problems they were in was Joe Piggott and George Dobson. Yeah. Joe Piggott's now Ipswich and George Dobson's now Charlton.
Charlton, of course, yeah.
Two big holes in the Wimbledon team, one up front, one in the middle. That's your core of your squad. Disappeared. Your biggest goal scorer, who scored 20 goals for a club that finished bottom 7. If you can get 20 goals finishing back there, and you take those goals away from Wimbledon, they are in trouble.
Well, I mean, look at Charlton in the Championship. We had Lyle Taylor banging in the goals. Took him out of that team at the end of the COVID situation, at the end of that season, where he didn't play because he refused to play. And that's what cost Charlton, pure and simple, because I think had he played in a couple of those games, he would have scored a couple of goals within that time of his contract, where he didn't.
Well, the biggest one for
just me having a chance to have another go at Lyle Taylor. Sorry,
but I think the biggest thing was, obviously, I remember Charlton playing Millwall at the back end of that season, and Macaulay Bonne, who I'm sure again we'll get onto Ipswich in a minute, missed so many chances in that game that if Lyle Taylor plays, we beat Millwall, and then we lose, go down by a point, and it's like that's where the point was right there.
That's the way it was. Well, that's 2 points dropped because if you yeah. I mean, it's Macaulay Bonne. We will discuss him in a minute because I do remember when he was sold to QPR for £2 million. I couldn't stop laughing. And I've got a friend who's a QPR fan. And he said, "We just signed your boy Bonne." I went, "Yeah, good luck with that, mate. That's £2 million too much." To be honest, but I'm really, I've got, I want to see Joe. I think Joe Piggott will do well, but we'll get more onto that in a minute. Teams around like Doncaster are always there and thereabouts. What are we thinking for them this year, Dan?
I like Doncaster. They've changed manager in this window. I think it's Richie Wellings who's taken over, who was at Salford previously. I think Doncaster are probably a striker away from being, a real force. Omar Bogle is their current strike force with Geordie Hawula. Both have been on the edge of top clubs. We had Omar Bogle, obviously. Geordie Hawula was at a short time playing for Portsmouth. John Bostock is there, very talented player, but is very hot and cold, and lost to Charlton last year. And that, so
Ryan.
I'm very interested actually to hear your guys' opinions on Sunderland, because obviously you follow the league because you're both Charlton fans and you're both in the league. They finished, if my research is correct, they finished in the playoffs last year. And it's obviously a very different Sunderland now to the Sunderland that everybody remembers that was in the Premier League and dropping like a stone. So take it away, fellas.
I'll give heads up on Sunderland. They've signed that North Korean striker, haven't they, Dan? They've signed a load of fucking no one. They haven't.
They've made our window look good. I mean, the one player that they've signed 2 players to my knowledge. One is Alex Pritchard. If you can keep Alex Pritchard fit, fantastic signing. They obviously lost Charlie Wyke, who again we'll get onto Wigan, I'm sure, in a bit. Sunderland, there's gaps in that team for me that makes them think that they're not going to be in and around. Their strike force at the minute is Aidan O'Brien and Ross Stewart, and Aidan O'Brien is nothing special.
Have they still got Aidan McGeady? Because
they have still got Aidan McGeady.
There are 2 Aidan McGeadys out in the Football League. There's the one that plays for Sunderland and has played for us, and there was the one that played at Charlton. 2 different players.
I felt sorry for him at Charlton because he played in central midfield, and I'll never understand why. But as going back to Sunderland, I just don't think they have enough. With Will Grigg has not had a good season with them for 2.5 years. He did well for MK Dons last year on loan. And their only other strikers, as I said, is Ross Stewart, who I know minimal about from Scotland, and Aidan O'Brien, who was at Millwall, who is more of a winger than a striker, and looked to struggle against us when we played last year. I still think they've got a good enough defence to be in and around it, but if they were to finish outside of the playoffs, it wouldn't shock me.
A club I admire is Accrington Stanley. Is Accrington Stanley, and because their manager's been there for 17 years, for crying out loud. And they've just sort of progressed every year, and they're steady. And the chairman's Andy Holt on Twitter. I've had to stop following him on Twitter because he just rambles, but he's very interactive, and he's got his heart in the right place, and he's very popular. Dan.
If you see them play, they obviously beat us twice last year. Once on television. We drew with them up there. We'd lost at home. For a team like Accrington Stanley, they played some very nice football. Their manager. I can't remember his name. It's Coleman, isn't it? John Coleman, I believe.
Yeah. John Coleman, 17 years.
They play some very nice football. They got good strikers. Kobe Bishop made us look awful last season. To be fair, a lot of teams did. Seamus Connolly in midfield. Dion Charles is another striker that caused us problem. They've just signed Harry Pell from Colchester, and they've got a young keeper on loan from, I think it's Man City this year, who's come with quite a big hype. So Accrington are more than in the conversation.
Okay, what about Wickham, down last year from the Championship? Have they got enough to go again, Ainsworth and the boys?
I don't want to rule them out because when everyone said they were going to get relegated, and they got promoted, so I can't rule them out. They're not one of the top teams that I'd look at, but again, it much like Oxford in a way that I think they're going to be hovering. And I'm not sure they just have a bit like Charlton, do they have the squad? Looks like they're going to lose Ikpeazu to Middlesbrough. and they're going to be left with Akinfenwa, who's, I think, more famous on the internet than for his football skills.
Yeah. Okay, moving swiftly on. One of the teams that come down, and Charlton's first opponents this week, Sheffield Wednesday. Not very popular in these parts, I've got to say. I've had some personal issues at Sheffield Wednesday. And I mean, they're clearly too big for League One. So League Two, hopefully, be for them because they've got a points deduction hanging over them, haven't they?
Do they? Do they start on minus points?
No, it's a suspended points deduction. So it's
so no, they don't.
But it could if things don't get themselves sorted, they could. But they've had a lot of players leave.
They've had a lot of players leave, but I think their manager's Darren Moore, correct?
Yes.
I like his business. They've still got Barry Bannon, who Charlton fans have had.
He loves Charlton, doesn't he? He loves.
Does
Charlton.
not love Charlton.
He really loves Charlton. I mean, he tweeted the day Charlton got relegated from the Championship, and yeah,
and he didn't like it when we tweeted him back.
Yeah, he's gonna get someone.
Bailey Peacock Farrell in goal, which I think is bonkers that he's going to be in League One. Lee Gregory up front from Millwall, formerly of Millwall. I think he actually has come from Derby. They've still got Josh Windass, Lewis Wing from Middlesbrough, Florian Camberry, who was at Hibs and did okay, and Jack Hunt from Bristol City, Marvin Johnson from Middlesbrough. They've built quite a squad. Callum Patterson they've turned into a striker, and that one's still beyond my recognition.
Oxford United and Carl Robinson. The man talks a good game, and he talks a good game, and he talks, and then he talks, and then after that he'll talk some more. What are we? Because they're thereabouts last year.
They've got two of the most interested strikers in the league in terms of what they've done previously in Matty Taylor and Sam Winnell. Matty Taylor's turned up last year. I think Sam Winnell had an injury, which has sadly been part of Sam Winnell's problems. Again, been in the playoffs 2 years, lost close games to Blackpool and Wickham, obviously at Wembley. I enjoyed watching Carl Robinson cry at Wembley, but that's a different matter. I'm happy to watch him cry anywhere, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's look at the promotion places. Or Dan, what else? Promotion places?
No, promotion places, yeah.
The promotion places, the actual top two, automatic. Wigan and Ipswich have gone about the pre-season in terms of buying players and signing players. And you've got to sum this up in about 5 minutes flat, to be honest, Dan. Are they looking, if they're looking likely, aren't they?
Ipswich,
Possibly.
I think Paul Cook has done what you say a team should do when you go to League One. He has gone to every club in the league and bought the team's best players. Wes Burns from Fleetwood, Joe Pigott, as we mentioned, from AFC Wimbledon,
Which Chris
Scott
Powell
Fraser
did.
from Milton Keynes. Yeah, exactly. Milton Keynes for Scott Fraser. Haladecki, I think is how you pronounce it, was the keeper at Salford. George Edmondson from Rangers was a big fee. Raheem Harper from West Brom, who was released. Macaulay Bonne is,
all right. We'll gloss over that one.
But the squad they have is Connor Chaplin as well. Ipswich are they have built a squad, if it works, that will walk this league.
Wigan, we think will be possibly there or thereabouts.
Wigan interests me. I'm very intrigued. They've signed a lot of players who you would say have either had their day in terms of when they were at their best, but still are quite young. Jordan Cousins is only 26, 27. He should boss League One. Jack Watmore at the back is a fantastic centre-back. Had a bad year with Portsmouth last year.
I always sign him in League One, and I always sign him on Football Manager on the Championship. When I'm a Championship side, I will always go for Jack Watmore, and I don't understand how he hasn't been picked up before now.
I think it's just because he struggled a bit for Portsmouth last year, hence why he was released. But also the big one for them is, I know we talked about Aidan McGeady, and that was a big thing, but Charlie White scored 30 goals in League One last year. And he's now at Wigan. You score 30 goals and you're available for free. He was supposed to be going to Celtic, and then all of a sudden he popped up at Wigan. So they've
paid some money, wages there, haven't they, and a signing on fee.
Ben Amos from Charlton, who supposedly was offered 10 grand. That's League One teams do not be passing out League One. 10 grand is not passed around,
especially in this post-COVID where there's not a lot of money around for clubs to be spending the money that Wigan and Ipswich are both spending. If it doesn't work for them. It's all very well signing these players. They've got to gel. I do remember being involved at Charlton when Chris Powell signed I think, the best part of 25 players in the pre-season leading up to the start of the season, and every player was thinking they're not going to gel. And then being close at hand and seeing pre-season that they were gelling, and then thinking, yeah, this one's sorted. And then when you see a signing coming in right at the end of the window, it was a free transfer. This French fella, no one had heard of, Yang something, Kermagant, and that whole team gelled. And it depends if you've got the right characters, doesn't it? Really, Dan?
Yeah, precisely. And we were lucky enough to know and meet and spend time with some of the players, and you could tell the atmosphere at the squad was brilliant. The one team I do want to mention before we come off League One, Rotherham United. The most up and down yo-yo. They make West Brom's up and down Premier League Championship look impressive. Look less impressive. They have a fantastic squad. Kieran Sadlier, Freddie Ladapo, Shane Ferguson from Millwall, obviously Michael Smith, who Charlton fans will know. Oliver Rathbone, who was quite a good player at Rochdale, has been picked up. Their team's been together for a few years. They've gone up and down more or less with this squad for the last 3 or 4 seasons. I would not be shocked to see them do it again.
And it just depends.
Last mention for Portsmouth as well, obviously, who still have John Marcus.
John Marcus, who cries on playoff semi-finals, doesn't he?
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful sight.
Right.
Again.
On to the Championship then, and glaring us straight in the face is Wayne Rooney and his Derby team are in an absolutely pitiful situation. And I think it's going to take, I would say it's going to take close to a miracle for them to not get relegated, really. Is there any discussion about Derby?
No, I don't think so. Sadly, as Charlton fans and going into that Championship season, we kind of know how they feel. We were in a similar place.
And the manager
they're
took
arguably in a worse place, aren't they? If you consider that they've got 7, 8 players, that they were in a very similar place to us.
And they're embargoed.
Yeah, like we were.
Yeah.
So, but they've got less players.
Our manager hasn't taken out Jason Knight in pre-season.
No, that was helpful. But then Levi probably would.
Ryan.
Every time I look at Derby County, I wonder what on earth the owners are doing. It goes back years with these owners. Why Wayne Rooney even got the job, I don't know. It's obviously just because of his name. He probably has done his coaching badges by that point anyway, but he had no experience. They were in trouble. He was their star player, their captain, and then they're like, well, we'll just give you the manager's job as well. We've had it so many times. They went left and right. The whole Jaap Stam fiasco. They brought back Steve McLaren for a very brief spell, and that went wrong. They had relative success with Frank Lampard.
You're saying his name wrong. Steve McLaren.
Steve McLaren. It's about the philosophy. Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Like I said, there was the issue with Jaap Stam as well, and then they had it was Lampard who was there, wasn't it?
Lampard got into the playoff final, and then Philip Cocu came in.
Exactly. It's just the thing that baffles me with them is it's one to the other. They had relative success with Frank, and then Philippe down the toilet, and then I think they did all right under Jaap Stam, and then the following manager came in and it was back down the toilet. The owners there baffle me. They don't seem to know what they're.
If you're
it's anyone with a name.
This applies to any team in the Championship. If you're a manager in the Championship, are you looking over your shoulder and thinking Frank Lampard's available as a manager?
I don't know if Frank would drop back to the Championship now.
I think he would.
That's the problem.
But who in the Premier League is going to appoint Frank Lampard?
No, but that's the thing. But I wonder if someone would take the gamble. If it doesn't go well for Palace, would they take the gamble? Possibly. The thing with Derby, I just want to mention with Derby.
I hope they don't, because I like Frank Lampard.
The thing that you said about Ipswich and Wigan about them spending money, Derby are literally the proof. That they had Tom Lawrence, they had Tom Ince.
Yeah,
there was a few others that are not popping into my head, but they had a very expensive squad.
And Wayne Rooney wasn't cheap.
Even before that, I'm thinking more when Charlton were in the Championship with Derby. When we beat them at the Valley 5-4, whatever it was, that Derby team was ridiculous. And now they have some good players. Still have Tom Lawrence. Colin Cousin-Richards was a bright spark last season. Christian Bielik, Charlton fans will tell you, is fantastic. They're true. David Marshall's a good keeper, but they just don't have the numbers. They are a shoo-in, surely.
Ryan.
I don't think they have the numbers or the manager to do it. Like I said, he's completely inexperienced, and the only way they've gone under his management is down. And like you said, they've lost more and more players by the end of the season. And do they have the finances to keep bankrolling these absurd managerial appointments and overpaid signings that they keep making? And just quickly, just to go back to Frank Lampard just for a second, I think he's got to go back down to the Championship to go back up to the Premier League, because he did well under certain circumstances at Chelsea in his first year. But then after that, it was all downhill. So I think he's got to go down a league to come back up.
Okay, let's look at teams like Peterborough. Now, they're one of those clubs, they find really good players for not a lot, and then they sell them. And I'll give you Ivan Toney, who's going to be playing his trade. Who's going to be playing his trade in the Premier League this season, and Dwight Gale. And they just find good players, get the best out of them, and then flog them on for good money. So the chairman, I mean, the chairman seems like he's not daft. And the manager seems to know what he's... But they're one of these clubs that are sometimes too good for League One, but struggle to stay in the Championship.
I think the problem with Peterborough in former years is, as you said, when they go up, when they came up to the Championship before, they lost Dwight Gale, that they were going to go down. They've gone up this year with Clark Harris. I think with Clark Harris's age being the plus side of, I think he's 26, 27, not a lot of teams are going to take a gamble on a 27-year-old who's never played in the Championship. I really like Johnson Clark Harris. Sammy Schmodix, I think is how you pronounce it. Again, as you said, picked him up quite cheap from Bristol City and has been a revelation, made us look stupid twice last season. Joel Randall from we were talking, I wouldn't say Egypt, from Exeter for £1 million. Fantastic player.
Ryan?
I think they've got a very sensible business model. It's very similar to the way Brentford do things. They find the players, they make a profit on them. They find another one, they make a profit on that one. It's a good business model, but it doesn't equal sustainability when you get higher up. So it will get you up. It won't keep you up, because the minute you come up, you then sell your best player and your main source of goals, which is quite often the case. So then you don't stay up and you drop back down. That's a conversation I think we may have again when we talk about the Premier League, with Brentford finally going up this year.
I think with Peterborough, though, as I said, I think it's different. When they had Dwight Gale and Ivan Toney, they're 23, 24 years old. Clark Harris is on his way to 30, and I think that will stop. I never played at that level. I think it will stop a lot of the team's interest in him. He spent years with Bristol Rovers, for instance, but still scoring
Lyle
load
Taylor
of goals.
was late 20s when he got promoted with Charlton to the Championship.
Yeah, and the only interest in him was when he'd proven he could do it with us.
Yeah.
January came, and Nottingham Forest all of a sudden... It was Brentford, wasn't it? It was Brentford, wasn't it?
Brentford
in January that almost signed him.
Yeah.
But obviously didn't. And I think it could be similar with Clark Harris. I think Peterborough are a good side. They play good football. They will be fine.
Bristol City, I want to look at, because before we went on air, Ryan mentioned this. They've got Nigel Pearson as the boss, and they've made a couple of signings. He signed a couple of familiar players, Matty James and Andy King. Now, they finished last year 19th, didn't they? Ryan's got a sneaking suspicion for them.
I do. I've just looked at their squad all the way through. I'm a big fan of Matty James, by the way, because obviously he's a Man United youth. And prior to having a couple of really bad injuries at Leicester, he looked like he'd finally hit a nice level at Leicester. But I mean, if you look at the Bristol City squad from back to front, just from their goalkeeper Bentley, who's always had fantastic potential but hasn't quite lived up to the hype. Their centre backs in Callas, who's been around a long time, lots of experience,
international defender,
and good talent.
You know.
Exactly.
International defender.
They've got Narky Wells up front as well, who's going to get you goals at Championship level, providing the team's playing well. I was talking to Dan about this previously as well, and he said that Bristol City are normally there or thereabouts. You always look at them in the table; they're normally either in the playoffs or just below the playoffs. And I was talking to Dan, and Dan just said last year just seemed to be a bit of a mare for him. But like Pete just said, with a midfield axis, I just think I just look at that squad and it looks like it should be going up. It's about time, I think.
My concern for Bristol City is the squad has been the same now for quite a few years. If you look back and remember, Ryan, you'll remember this. I'm sorry to use it, but do you remember when Bristol City beat Man United in the FA Cup?
Yes.
It's most of those. I don't bring that up because that's just a big
cruel.
time when Bristol City
That's
were on the
cruel.
TV.
That's just cruel. You are.
That Bristol City team is still there. The majority of the players are still there. There's one or two that have changed. Marley Watkins has left, but the majority of the team is still there. I don't know if they've refreshed enough, especially after a difficult season last year.
Okay. So who's going to make the playoffs and who's going to go up from the championships? That's the next thing, really, that we must be looking at.
Well, I've just put mine in. Bristol City, I think, are going to sneak the playoffs this year. I just think it's their year. Yeah, I just think it's their year. That, like I said, there's always that one team that are always there or thereabouts, and then one year they finally nail it. Last year it was Brentford. So this year, I reckon Bristol City are in with a shout.
Okay.
Dan?
So I have two playoff outsiders that I want to chuck in. One's going to upset Charlton fans. Don't rule out Millwall.
Oh, no.
Don't rule out Millwall.
Really?
Simply because last season,
Have a word.
they finished 8th. And the year before that, they finished 8th. So they've both years been in and around the conversation. All they've lacked is a goal scorer.
Yeah.
Now, Millwall fans will hope, I think it's pretty unlikely, but they will hope that Benicophobe can stay fit. If Benicophobe can stay fit, he will score them goals. He will score at this level if he's fit. The problem is keeping him fit. If they manage it, there's your goals to get them into the playoffs. I wouldn't necessarily say they'd go up, but they'll definitely be in the conversation. The one for me is led by Neil Warnock, Middlesbrough.
Ooh.
They have to rebuild a bit because they lost Britta Sombalonga. They've still got Chuba Akpom. They've brought in Uche Piazzu. I like their defence. Dick Steele, Nathan Wood, Dale Fry, Mark Boller, fantastic. Duncan Watmore was brilliant for them last year. Johnny Housen probably is one of the best fielders in the league. Sam Morsey's brilliant as well. They have the potential to be
And they have
underdogs.
the manager that knows how to do it. And they have the
That's
manager.
a big shout, though.
The other thing is against them is Neil Warnock as a bumbag when he's photographed that he signs for fans. That's a
He's
big
a hero.
That's a big
No, it's
no
great.
to me. That's a big
That's
no.
a big shout, Dan. That is a big shout.
It's
I'm not saying they're
about-
going to.
I'm
not saying they're gonna win the league.
I mean playoffs,
Yeah,
yeah,
playoffs.
definitely, because you're up against some teams that have come down from the Premier League who still have cash, because they still have the parachute money, which makes it a bit of an unfair. And when we're talking at Fulham, West Brom, and Sheffield United.
But what's the one thing that all three of them have?
Go on,
Brand new managers.
brand new managers, yeah. So you think
Brand new
that goes
managers.
against them?
You don't know. I think Sheffield United. My favourite one is Slaviska Jokanovic at Sheffield United. I think they'll go back up
I
Yeah.
think
because they've kept the same squad.
I think
But-
Marco Silva is overrated, so I think Fulham will barely make the playoffs. Genuinely,
I
believe
don't have
that.
Fulham in my top 3. West Brom, I think I can't pronounce his name. I want to say Valerian Ishmael, but I could have
Valerian
completely
Ishmael.
butchered
Yeah,
that.
no, you got
That's
it right.
right.
He turned Barnsley into a footballing side, which I didn't think would ever happen. I've watched Barnsley for years. They bore me to death. They're rubbish. Last year, they turned into a good side.
And they signed
And,
Alex
he's
Mowat
gonna-
from Barnsley to come
hopefully
along.
goes to West Brom. Carlin Grant should score goals in a West Brom team. Callum Robinson should score goals in that West Brom team. But new managers, so you don't know what's going to happen.
Ryan,
I was just going to say that, actually, going on Dan's logic of the teams that have come down, talking about West Brom, you can make a case for them, but they've got a brand new manager. My ones go up are Sheffield United, because just looking at their squad,
and the manager's done it twice.
yeah, and I think the manager is talented. He does make some odd decisions, like that time he went to Everton. If you just look at the forward line that they've got, there's championship goals written all over it. And the other one I did have for going up, although Pete's just sort of poo-pooed all over that one, was actually Fulham, because again, if you just look at the squad that they've got, if they can get the manager feeding it right, then I don't see why they don't go straight back up, especially if they can get Mitrovic firing again.
My problem with Fulham is they haven't regenerated their squad,
No.
and there's big gaps where I think it's important in the Championship. For me, the most important thing in the Championship is having a squad. At the top of the Championship is to have that squad to rotate. And I'm not sure Fulham have it compared to the others. If Mitrovic gets injured, which he likes to do, bless him.
Bless him, he does like
They
a day off.
don't have Ademola Lookman this season, who covered up front. They don't have Josh Maja, who played up front last year. Marco Silva, obviously there's time in the window, but I'd fancy a team like Cardiff to be more up there than Fulham, to be fair.
Bournemouth, let's look at Bournemouth. Scott Parker, they're not the Bournemouth they were, are they? They've lost a few players. They're not. They didn't do that well last year. They did okay last year, but they didn't achieve what they wanted. And I don't think they've improved in the summer. They've changed the manager and they've admitted they've got something wrong. Again, it's another managerial change. They've got a transfer window maybe to sort it out, possibly. Dan, what do you think?
I think they're another team where if they can get a striker in who I'm completely confident will score them goals, there'll be no problem. They're back four with Lewis Cook and Lloyd Kelly, Chris Mepham, fine. David Brooks is a fantastic winger. Your strike force is Dominic Solanke. That's a problem.
Yeah, that is a big issue. Yeah.
He's overrated. Dan Juma played really well last year off the wing. If he can recreate the form, I don't see why they're not going to be up there. Philip Billing, who some people might know from Huddersfield, plays actually behind the striker very well for Bournemouth. But yeah, you need a better striker than Dominic Solanke, don't you?
Ryan.
I can agree on the Dominic Solanke thing. Billing is also being linked with moves elsewhere.
I thought he was Kent cricket captain.
So whether
he is, yeah.
Whether they keep him or not, but I don't know. I just think that the whole plan and the structure of Bournemouth for all the years of going up under Eddie Howe and playing football a certain way, it seems to be a club that is just completely lost at the moment, and they're not quite sure what they are or what they're aiming for. So I'm guessing probably playoffs at best for them.
Can I add a little playoff fancy that I have, which I think they finished ninth last year. Their manager's just got a new contract, and they've got rid of the striker that couldn't hit a cow's bum with a banjo. QPR.
It's a fantastic shout.
QPR, they've just given Warburton. I like what he does. He did a great job at Brentford. I liked what he does, and he's been allowed time at QPR to have a good look, get a few. I mean, he's made some bad decisions. Signing Macaulay Bonne was one of them. Was that him though?
Yeah, it was him.
And anyone who thinks Macaulay Bonne is a championship striker needs to be. But everyone's entitled to make a bad signing, and he'd scored more than 10 goals for a Charlton team that got relegated. So I can understand, but I just think he's good and he improves players, and I think QPR, if they can get a couple of bodies in, they'll be in and thereabouts on the playoffs. I'm not saying they'll get promoted, but Dan.
Their business in the summer, I think, has been very shrewd. Charlie Austin on a free transfer.
Brilliant buy.
Came in on loan last year and carried on when he left. Stefan Johansson for $500,000 from Fulham.
Yeah,
again, was there last season on loan, now for free. Moses Odebajo is, if you can keep him fit, a very good right back. Andre Dozzell is a highly rated midfielder.
Dozzell.
From
I was going to say that.
Is it Dozzell? I don't
know. His dad was Jason Dozzell, Ipswich player. So,
Dozzell, I love that one.
Albert Adoma we know Albert Adoma's abilities. I just want to say here, I think Sam Field is a hugely talented player, sadly out for the season. We had him at Charlton, couldn't keep him fit. When he was fit, one of the best defensive midfielders I've seen, but just could not stay fit, bless him. Lyndon Dykes will score goals. QPR are a brilliant shout.
If anyone in the Championship is looking for a defensive midfielder, go and make Derby an offer for Christopher Billick, and you'll get a good one there as well. That's I'll give you right here and now.
Ryan, 10 million for him.
Ryan.
I was going to say, I think QPR is actually a really good shout. I think Dan's just listed a lot of the players, and I can echo the thing on Sam Field. I remember him being a kid at, I think it was West Brom, and he had so much potential and he never quite got there. QPR, for me, I think they actually embody the Championship, because if you've got a good squad and a good manager, you don't have to have the best squad or the best manager, but because of the way the Championship is, it's so hectic, where a couple of results you're in the bottom, a couple of results you're in the playoffs. I think QPR for me sort of embodies what the Championship is. You've got a good squad, a good manager, you're in with a good shout of going somewhere.
You do need a good squad in the Championship. A
Mm.
first 11 is not enough. It's
And
nowhere near enough.
They've also got a very good youth academy that does produce good quality Championship players.
The thing with the Championship is you don't care who you're playing. If you're going to play Blackpool at the weekend or you're playing West Brom, you genuinely cannot guess what is going to happen. The Championship is so much fun, but so much not fun if you're a team in the Championship, because it gives you heart attacks. As Charlton, when we were there drawing with West Brom, we beat Fulham, and then we couldn't get past Luton or Hull. That it's such a random league, and I think for me it's probably the most fun to watch.
It's the most open league, isn't it? Because on any given day, the bottom team can absolutely batter the top team. I've seen it. I've seen time and time again. As a Charlton fan, I remember Cardiff flying high in the Championship. 2-0 up, Cardiff were after 20 minutes, and 5-4 we beat them, and it was like, what has gone on here? Even just everyone connected with that was stunned. But that's the sort of thing it throws up, games like that, Ryan.
So my question for you guys is, and I've got an answer for this as well, of the 3 teams that came down, which one do you think is going to be the one to struggle to get back up? Because my money's on West Brom, because I look at that squad and I just don't see anything.
And Fulham. No, I think Fulham. I don't think West Brom are that
just
good.
Because I think Sheffield United will go up regardless. I think West Brom have my thing with West Brom is I really like their defence, which is and I think if you have a good defence in the Championship, that wins you more than having a great strike force
and they've got Carl and Grant who will get 15, 20 goals this season.
Exactly. With Fulham, my concern is your only striker is Mitrovic. He will get injured. Who are you going to replace him with?
They've still got Helder, though, haven't they?
Who?
Helder Costa. They've still got him, who's a very talented player.
No, not Helder Costa. Calaviero.
Oh, wrong one. Sorry, my mistake. Ivan Cavaliero.
He's not going to get the goals that Mitrovic, when fit, will.
Yeah, no, and we played, and I know it's only pre-season, but Charlton played Fulham the other day, and against the League One defence, they couldn't create chances, and they had their first team out. They had Mitrovic, Cabano, Tim Ream was at the back. They had Calaviero. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've made a mess of it, but
they've got Harrison Reed as well.
They've got Harry Wilson, who came on, just signed from Liverpool. They've got bits and pieces. I'm just concerned that if 1 or 2 injuries for Fulham's striking options, and they will all of a sudden stop scoring.
Is there any other dark horses around, like Forest or Stoke, or I'm just saying, you never know.
Forest, Nottingham Forest are a team that I don't even want to try and predict what's going to happen. Their team, they should be like they should have been last year, aside in and around the playoffs. However, having seen what they did last year, you don't know. Lewis Grabban, Lyle Taylor should be goals. Chris Hughton, I trust to do a job, but
can I just
Forest
say,
Lyle Taylor, ones that fall.
Lyle Taylor keeps the bench warm more than on the pitch, though, doesn't he? Let's be honest.
But he was still their leading goal scorer last season.
Yeah, yes. I like him. Ryan.
Noticed.
I can only echo what Dan said. I look at Nottingham Forest the same way I look at Derby County. You just look at them, the structure of the club. You look at the owners of the club, and you just look at them and shake your head and think, what are you doing? I mean, we all know the history of Nottingham Forest. It was a huge, huge club, a former Premier League club. And
history
then it's
means
just gone...
nothing in the EFL. History counts.
Oh, no, I know. But I know that. But I'm just saying, if you just look at, we're talking about Nottingham Forest, and it's just become a shambles. One-time European Cup winners, I think. Was it more than once? I can't remember, but
twice.
I remember growing up, and they were always in the Premier League. You could count on them to be in the Premier League. And now you just look at them and say, okay, you've stayed in the Championship, but you've got no direction, no foundation. What are you doing?
I think, as someone who's watched the Championship, Forest have always been close.
Yeah.
They went through that period. There was 3 or 4 years when Leicester came up to the Premier League, where it could have been Forest rather than Leicester. It really could have been. They had some fantastic players. They just missed out. They've been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years. Last year was when they cleared out the squad from.
They needed to.
They kind of said, no, we need to change because, as I said, they had a 5 or 6 year run where they were building and had that direction. Last year was the year where they cleared, and this year we'll see what happens. This year is going to be very important for Chris Hughton and Nottingham Forest.
2 seasons ago, Charlton were locked in a battle with a team to stay in the Championship, Barnsley, and Barnsley are still there. And they seem to appoint foreign managers who are tactical managers, and they've got the new one now in Marcus Shop, who Barnsley are saying is a tactical genius. Is it going to be enough? They finished 5th last year.
Well, last year they were not carried is the wrong word, but they loaned Daryl Dyke from Orlando City, who was a huge presence and scored a lot of goals. And also, we don't know the impact of the new West Brom manager, Ishmael.
Yeah.
Because it seemed from outside, like, as you said, we were battling with him 2 years ago. He came in and all of a sudden we were, pushing. They were pushing for the playoffs and made the playoffs. And I saw a lot of people really fancying them for promotion. They played Swansea. They sadly ran into a Swansea side who have been ripped apart over the summer. And I think Barnsley will have to see if they can replace the goal scorer. I'm looking at their squad now and I don't see a goal scorer for them this season.
Ryan.
I worry for Barnsley because Ishmael did such a good job. Like Dan said, you've got to replace your top scorer and you've got to replace your manager on top of that as well. I can't see them doing as well as they did last season. I may be forced to eat more humble pie because I've been eating that all week, but I just don't see it.
I think one last team to mention, if on my list, was Cardiff City.
I've got another team to mention
because of simply their squad doesn't. Mick McCarthy turned Cardiff around when he walked in last year. They went from a side that wasn't doing much to a side with a bit about them. Kiefer Moore might not be the most exciting player. He will score goals.
It's Mick McCarthy. I love Mick McCarthy.
That video of Mick McCarthy, I don't know if you've seen it, the Careless Whispers playing over the top and the camera spins to him in the dugout and he puts his eyebrows up at the camera. That has me every time I see it. He cracks me up. And I think Cardiff, under him, they've released Johnny Williams, which I'm going to pretend is a big issue. I think they have a chance.
Yeah. Has Johnny Williams signed for anyone yet? Out of the way?
No, he's floating around.
I know someone from another podcast will be only too happy to see him back in a red shirt.
Yeah,
Ryan, yes.
Just a quick question while we're talking about charismatic managers, shall we say?
Oh.
Do we know where Ollie is?
Ollie?
Yeah.
Ian Holloway?
Yeah.
No
he was
way.
released by Grimsby, so last thing I know, doing nothing.
He'll pop up on Sky
that's a
Sports
shame.
from time to time.
He
I was
was.
going to say, I miss his interviews.
He played a part in Grimsby returning to non-league football last season, so I think he's in hiding.
Yeah. He was amazing on. I remember when he came up with Blackpool and he was on Match of the Day.
Press conferences were brilliant. Yeah,
it was fantastic. I will never forget the line that he was talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, and he turned around and said, "If there is a God, he's hung like a hamster." I just fell about laughing. I miss him so much.
What do we think Birmingham City are going to do under Lee Boyer? I love the club. I love the club. I love the club, but I love them more. Boyer, that Boyer.
I think they'll be the Birmingham City they've always been and sit in the mid-table and not really push for the playoffs and also not being a threat. Lucas, I don't want to butcher his name, Djukovic.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, we know what you mean. Yeah.
Fantastic striker, even at his age.
Yeah.
If they can keep an EK fit, we saw last year that an EK can be a very dangerous player, but keeping him fit. Jordan Graham, the same. They seem to have stopped. They went through that period of trying to buy abroad and it didn't really work for them. I know they've got Mikel San Jose at the back, but this year Bowyer's gone very British based. Jordan Graham chucks an EK.
Not a bad thing to do, I've got to say.
You don't know how it's going to work for them, but I think he's been smart with his business. He loaned the lad from Man United that I'm not even going to attempt to say, Chong.
Titus Chong, yeah.
He looks a good talent. So, but good at taking youngsters on loan and giving them good talent, on the
But can he
pitch.
can he not be a bit harsh on youngsters? I mean, we've seen him at Charlton with a talent like Albie Morgan. He was quite harsh with him, where he was openly criticising him in press conferences and openly criticising his players in press conferences. That's fine up to a point, but that doesn't it ends up going against you, I think.
But I think that was a thing that escalated over a few years. He's brand new at Birmingham, so Birmingham have very little, I'd assume, to go against him now.
So hopefully he's learned the lessons from his time at Charlton. Because don't get me wrong, what he did at Charlton was magnificent. That playoff, as we said earlier, but the seasons after that, I felt he was just a bit too harsh on the players.
Last season, yeah, I felt sorry for him because there was a lot going behind the scenes. But in terms of Chong to Albie Morgan, oh dear, Albie is. I think they're two different players. Chong's had a lot more experience, has come from a club with a lot more pressure. So,
Ryan?
On the subject of Birmingham, I think they're going to be, like Dan said, a good, solid mid-table side.
Tough.
They might push the
Tough
playoffs.
To beat, but
yeah, they might push the playoffs if someone has a bad time and the way the league bounces up and down. Titus Chong is a very unique individual player. He's a winger. He looks enormous. He looks absolutely gigantic. His hair's enormous as well, which I think makes him look even taller. He's very deceptively quick. He hasn't had the best of times in the loan spells that he's been out on. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch and see how he does.
If I was a manager, any young player with long hair would have it cut. I've got a thing about long-haired players in this day and age. I don't like it. Don't like it. No, I don't care how much talent you've got. No. Get your hair cut. No. I don't want to see your hair. You stand out more. I don't want that. I want you just to play football. It's like having multicoloured boots. Don't be doing it. Get black boots and be done with. Get your hair cut, son.
He reminds me, the easiest way I can put this, and for anybody who's seen the Minions films, when they get dyed purple and their hair goes enormous, that's what he reminds me of every time I see him, because his hair is massive. It's absolutely enormous. You're thinking Marouane Fellaini and then a little bit more.
Yeah. I would have gathered his haircut for Fellaini. You playing for us at Man U? Get your haircut first, son. Dan.
Titus Chong, he's a winger, right?
Yes, he is.
He won't be for much longer.
He's a very unorthodox player. When you look at him,
I tell you now, you will not be playing on the wing this season.
I was going to say, he does not look like a winger in the slightest. If you look at him on the pitch, you would be like, the easiest way I can describe it is, if you go back to the Euros, the Dutch had Bas Dost playing out wide and coming in, and you just saw this huge man on the wing. I think that's what you'll see with Titus Chong.
He will play attacking midfield because Lee Bowyer loves a diamond.
He does like it.
He loves a diamond.
He doesn't like a winger.
To be honest, if it was me, I think given his height and his presence, I'd probably be looking to turn him into a striker myself if I was a manager.
They have Juskovic and Chukwuemeka. They don't need any more big players up front.
Well. Chucks could give you a good 35 minutes, won't he? It went.
We got any players in the Championship to look out for, Dan?
Oh, this is the thing, and we need to. Yeah.
Matt Grimes from Swansea, if he stays, is a very big talent. Danny McNamara at Millwall is a young right back who I'm a fan of. Josh Murphy at Cardiff might finally show signs. Luke Freeman at Nottingham Forest is always class as far as I'm concerned. That's it right now. That's jumping out at me.
Pete?
Yeah, no, I'll go with Dan. I don't know enough about the Championship to. I don't prefer. I'm pretty much, and this is going to be a learning curve for me because I just sort of concentrate on Charlton, and that's all I've ever looked at because I don't watch much other football really, which is why I let you lot do the talking at the moment because, But I will be watching it much more this year. Clearly, by doing this Thunders, you've turned me into. Unfortunately, you pair of you will get me. I used to watch football, every game of football going. If there's football on television, as you remember, Ryan,
yes.
Growing up, if there was football on, we'd watch it. But I'm not like that now, and I'm only really interested in watching my team. And even then, that little luster has gone a little bit for me. I think There's a lot of So, but I'm intrigued to see what the championship season brings, and I think it'll be, as ever, the championship is the best league to watch, really, in terms of anyone having a chance. I just, as Dan said earlier, the bottom team could go up against the top team, and it's really not worth having a bet on because the bottom team could do them. Dan,
the one name I have to mention, we've already mentioned him in this podcast, but Joel Randall, who's just signed for Peterborough. Every person who has seen him at Exeter seems to think he'll have a similar career path to Ollie Watkins. So watch out for him in the championship. I'm interested to see what he does.
Excellent. Listen,
me personally, I was just going to say, I was just hoping for a good season for David Bentley. I've got a thing about goalkeepers with great potential that don't quite go where you think they would go. So I'm hoping Bentley has a good year.
Excellent. That's the EFL looked at. We'll do next week. We'll look at the Premier League, and that's where I think there'll be some discussions there.
It's going to be a lot to talk about.
It's going to be a lot to talk about, and we're doing that in a week's time. There could be some shenanigans on the transfer front going, because if a couple of players move, I mean, there's talk about previewing it. There's talk about Lukaku coming to Chelsea. Where's Harry Kane going to be?
Has Grealish signed for City?
And have these transfers opened up the window for for a bit? That's all next week on Football Thunders. Thanks very much, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
And to you, Dan.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll be back next week. Dan, how can people get in contact with us? Just get that done first.
We have a Twitter account at Football Thunders.
Oh, Twitter. Sorry.
Yeah. And Gmail is footballfunderspod@gmail.com, and of course our YouTube channel, which is Football Funders Podcast.
Yep. So thanks a lot. We'll see you again next time. Ta-ra.